according to the minhagim and pirushim of the Shalom, they davened, the Alter Rebbe davened Nusach Hari, and in the middle, the Alter Rebbe said this over, that in the middle he suddenly got a desire, a rotzen, to have a Geilelim Keim Teira. In those days, many Talmidei Chachamim and Baalei Aveda would get up and go to a faraway place, which wasn't comfortable, obviously, because you're not at home, and they would hurry in learning Torah over there, and Aveda. So that's what the Alter Rebbe decided, and he decided where to go. Last time we said there's a few nuschois. One was that he asked his brother where he should go, because he wasn't sure, because there were two cities in those days that became very famous amongst all the Yidden in those areas, Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Lita, two famous cities where Yidden were going to get, as they say, to gain knowledge in Torah and knowledge in Avodas Hashem. The place that was...
Make it selfie.
It's not working, Yaakov.
Let's make it selfie.
What's the problem?
What? Hello?
So the two cities that were famous in those days for Torah and so on, for people to go away from their home to go to those cities, one was Vilna. We were the famous Vilna Goyen Rebbe Leo, the Gro of Vilna, was the leader of all the Litvische Yidden, Misnagdische Yidden, and so on. And people would go. A lot of Gedolei Yisrael came out from Vilna. And the other place was Mezritch, where the Mezritch Maggid Reb Dov Ber was with his Talmidim. It is well known that the Mezritch Maggid had 120 Talmidim Vasikim, that means real Talmidim, and he had thousands of followers, Yidden, that became his Chassidim and his followers. So the Alter Rebbe, when he decided where to go, he decided he wants to be in the Geilel and Keim Torah. So he was thinking where to go. And we know last time I spoke about that he asked his brother, but it seems from the Alter Rebbe that he himself also made that decision. What was the reason for the decision? Says the Alter Rebbe, to learn I already knew a little, but to daven I still had to learn how to daven. And therefore he decided to go to Mezritch. Last time we spoke about the story that his wife, the Rebbe's Sterna, the Alter Rebbe's wife, he asked her permission to go to Mezritch, and she said, on condition, but tonight, that he stays there not more than a year and a half. In other words, for a year and a half, she gave him permission. She then got a hold of 30 ruble, and she bought him a horse and wagon, and him and his brother went out to Mezritch. In a little city called Orshe, on the way to Mezritch, the horse died. The Alter Rebbe right away said, it's a sign, min hashamayim, it's a siman min hashamayim, that they did something wrong. So he asked his brother, did you ask permission from your wife, from your Rebbetzin? He said, no. So he said, and that's the reason why we have got a menio to go to Mezritch. So you go back home, he said to his brother, and this I'll do for you. Whatever I learn in Mezritch, I will share it with you. And so he came to Mezritch by foot. The Alter Rebbe walked the rest of the way by foot, and he came to Mezritch. Says the Alter Rebbe, he told most of these stories over to the Tzemach Tzedek. Says the Alter Rebbe, the first days when I arrived in Mezritch, I saw that the Mezritch Maggid, our Rebbe, he wasn't his Rebbe yet, officially, and his Talmidim, Roiv Hayoim, most of the day and most of the night, they're involved in Avodah Shebelev. They would prepare themselves hours before each davening, that's Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. They would sit with Yishuv Hadas. After they finished davening, they would sit down and think through the inyonim in Chassidus and so on, and Avos Hashem v'chulu. Their preparations for Kriya Shema Shel Amita took hours. Tikkun Chatzois, everything with tremendous arichus. In other words, everything they did stretched for a long time, and it took them a long time to do it. Says the Alter Rebbe, but I was used to, in my Avodah in Vitebsk, I used to daven in the Siddur of the Arizal, in other words, the Nusach of the Arizal, and I used to daven with the Pirushei HaShalom HaKodesh, but I was very mugval, says the Alter Rebbe, I was very limited in my time, whether it was weekdays, Shabbos, or Yom Tov. my time I spent mostly to gain knowledge in Torah. That means Torah, Halacha, Agoda, Kabbalah, Chkira, so on and so forth. And even though the Avodah that I saw by the Mezritch Maggid, the holy Mezritch Maggid, and the Avodah of the older Talmidim of the Mezritch Maggid amazed me, says the Alter Rebbe. Pashut was, he saw something that he never saw before. Yet, I decided, this is not, I shouldn't say that. I decided to go back home. I'm going to go back home, and I will completely devote myself, like before, to learn Torah and gain a lot of knowledge, even more than before. I went out from the Beis Medrash of the Mezritch Maggid, and I started on my way home. Suddenly, I realized that something, some chayfetz, some belonging of mine, I forgot it in the Beis Medrash of the Mezritch Maggid. So I went back to take it. When I came back in the Beis Medrash of the Mezritch Maggid, I saw something very interesting. Somebody brought a shaila for a rav to the Mezritch Maggid. It was a shaila on the lung of a cow to find out if the cow is kosher. And I see that the Mezritch Maggid is involved in explaining the shaila and the halacha. And the divrei Torah the Maggid was saying was so deep. His logic was so deep. And I was amazed, says the Alter Rebbe, on the nigla of the Mezritch Maggid. Till now he saw Chassidus, Avodah Shebelev, but now he saw the Mezritch Maggid's ge'onis. He was very amazed, and I decided to stay on longer and see what happens. As when the Alter Rebbe arrived to the Mezritch Maggid started showing him tremendous chibur, tremendous affection, and at a certain time, we might say it later, the Mezritch Maggid told the Alter Rebbe something that the Baal Shem Tov had told him about the Alter Rebbe, and the Baal Shem Tov had told him, like a nevuah, he said, Reb Shneir Zalman, the Alter Rebbe will come to you, and then we'll decide to leave. Don't worry, he will come back, and he will become your Talmud. And this is exactly what happened. But we're going to go to another part, how the Alter Rebbe, when he came to the Mezritch Maggid, he decided, after being there for a little while, he became connected to the Mezritch Maggid. It took him a while to become completely connected, but he became mekusher to the Mezritch Maggid, and he decided he's going to become the Mishoris of the Mezritch Maggid. Hopefully we'll talk about that more in the next few shiurim. He says, what's the pshat of a Mishoris? Explained the Alter Rebbe to the Tzemach Tzedek. A Mishoris is that wherever the Rebbe is, that's where he is. So the Alter Rebbe would be wherever the Mezritch Maggid was. The Alter Rebbe came to the Mezritch Maggid, we spoke last time, Tov Kuf Chof Daled or Chof Hey. It seems like it was end of Tov Kuf Chof Daled, which happens to be 1764. And it was summertime, I believe. I called upon him. He went to the Mezritch Maggid. He had to go back home, as his wife had made a condition that he come back home a year and a half later. Then he came home. He went back to the Mezritch Maggid. Lepoil, it is known from the Rabbeim that the Alter Rebbe was by the Mezritch Maggid in those few visits that he came there and became a Talmud of his. He happened to be by the Mezritch Maggid for every yontif, different years for every yontif. Rosh Hashanah, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuos. And it was Shishayna Rabbo, Tov Kuf Chof Zayin, which means he came there Chof Daled, let's say the end, or Chof Hey. So he went home and he came back again. So Tov Kuf Chof Zayin, which is 1767, it was or 1766 at the end of the year. He came with the Mezritch Maggid. The Mezritch Maggid went into the sukkah, and the Alter Rebbe followed him into the sukkah. There was nobody there. The Mezritch Maggid told the Alter Rebbe, lock the door behind you so nobody comes in. Then the Mezritch Maggid said to him, do not be hispilus. Don't be too agitated, too excited. Be calm, he said. And a calmness, a pnimizdika calmness. This is something that only tzaddikim like them could understand and do. And he said to him, why did he warn him all this? He should be calm. The Baal Shem Tov, he says, is coming. 100 years later, Tov Reish Chav Zayin. This is Tov Kuf Chav Zayin. 100 years later, Heshayna Rabba Tov Reish Chav Zayin. It was in the days of the Rebbe Maharash. The Rebbe Maharash said to his sons and daughters that came into his sukkah, and he announced, today is 100 years from when the Alter Rebbe saw the Baal Shem Tov Behokitz for the first time. Behokitz means not in a dream. He saw him literally in the sukkah together with the Mezritch Maggid. This is after the Histalkus of the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov was Nistalik in Tov Kuf Chof, and this is Tov Kuf Chof Zayin. 7 years later, 7 years after the Baal Shem Tov passed away.
How many years before we get to Chassidus?
Well, Chof Zayin, so it's Lamed Zayin, Mem Zayin, Nun Zayin, and Nun Tes. So it's 32 years approximately before the prison. Tov Kuf Nun Tes was the prison. The Alter Rebbe arrived to the Mezritch Maggid 8 years before the Mezritch Maggid was Nistalik. And it so happens, by Shgacha Protis, that the Mezritch Maggid came to the Baal Shem Tov 8 years before the Baal Shem Tov was Nistalik. When the Tzemach Tzedek, I'm going to tell soon a story about the Chibor, the special affection that the Mezritch Maggid showed to the Alter Rebbe. Just let me first say a few interesting things here. The Alter Rebbe, when he came back from the Mezritch Maggid, he developed a tremendous ava, a tremendous love for Tmimiz Dike Poshet Yidden, Yidden that don't know much. Before that, he also had a certain closeness to Poshet Yidden. The Alter Rebbe was Mekarev them. But after Mezritch, it was totally different. When the Tzemach Tzedek was 9 years old, that was the Derech of the Baal Shem Tov. Yes. But before that, Alter Rebbe didn't tell him too much about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov asked everyone to keep it secret. His uncle, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, told him certain inyonim of Chassidus, and told him a little bit about the Baal Shem Tov, like Derech Agav. But the Alter Rebbe did not. When he came to Mezritch, he became closer to the Mezritch Maggid and to the Baal Shem Tov. When the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the grandson of the Alter Rebbe, who we will devote some shiurim for. When the Tzemach Tzedek was 9 years old, his mother passed away when he was 3 years old. So he slept and stayed and lived by the Alter Rebbe in his house. So when the Tzemach Tzedek was everything, the Minhagi Chabad that we know today, and every Chabadnik does it all over the world, all was passed down from the Tzemach Tzedek, who Pashit observed by his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, how he does all these inyanim. Whether it's Birchas Koyanim, under the Tal, all these inyanim was from the Alter Rebbe, by the Tzemach Tzedek, who lived by him. So when the Tzemach Tzedek was 9 years old, the Alter Rebbe was telling him stories about the time that he spent in Mezritch by the Mezritch Maggid. He told him stories before Mezritch, he told him stories after Mezritch, he told him stories about the Baal Shem Tov, about his father, Reb Baruch, who was a Tzaddik Nister, and it was a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, and his uncle, Reb Yosef Yitzchak. All these people were connected to the Baal Shem Tov. But Tzemach Tzedek became 13 years old, and he understood everything very well already. It's the story the Frierdiker Rebbe says. When the Tzemach Tzedek became 13 years old, he was mevatel, that means he would put down the avodah of davening of a Pashut Yid. And he expressed himself, Gamkin Chosid, Eich Mira Chosid. This is also a Chosid. That's what Tzemach Tzedek said about a Pashut Yid davening b'avodah. Then he had a talk with his grandfather, the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe told him, yes, that is a Chosid. You should rub yourself, Reibzach, I don't know how to say it in English, you should hang around between Chassidim so they can refine you, almost like saying sanding off the sharp edges, like they did to me in Mezritch, said the Alter Rebbe to the Tzemach Tzedek. And then the Alter Rebbe told him like this, when I came to Mezritch, I saw certain Yidden davening with tremendous islavus, tremendous fire and excitement. And I thought to myself, says the Alter Rebbe, surely these Yidden are Bekim, they totally know by heart, inside out, Bavli, Yerushalmi, Sifro, Sifri, Kabbalah, Chassidus. When I started talking to those Yidden who were davening Bislavus, I realized they're Yidden that were called En Yaakov Yidden. All they know is the stories of the Gemara. They don't even have the koyach to learn Gemara very well. And they know a few halachas of Shulchan Aruch. But the meaning behind the Ein Yaakov, the stories, the deeper meaning, they don't know nothing. So I felt very bad, says the Alter Rebbe. It made me feel down. And I also expressed myself. Also Chassidim. They're davening Bislavas, they're also Chassidim, like he put them down. It doesn't say here, it just says what the Rebbe Rashab said at the end of the story. The Rebbe Rashab said in the name of the Rebbe Marash, who heard it from his father, the Tzemach Tzedek, who was there. He talked to the Alter Rebbe when he was 13 about this idea that he's mevatel. He puts down these simple Yidden who davening ba'aveda. So the Tzemach Tzedek said to the Rebbe Maharash, his son, who said it to the Rebbe Rashab, my grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, was blessing himself how Levi he can reach the level of the Tmimus of a Ish Poshut, of a Poshut Yid. And the Tzemach Tzedek said, when my grandfather said those words, he had tears in his eyes. So what? The Tzemach Tzedek said to his son, and I couldn't figure out, such a Baal Moichin, the Alter Rebbe, was totally intellect. He doesn't get excited like a regular one of us. And such a Baal Moichin like the Alter Rebbe should have such a thing that he should have tears when he spoke about this. He should have tears in his eyes saying that he would love to reach the level of a Pashut Yid. So this is one of the stories that happened to the Alter Rebbe in Mezritch. Now the Mezritch Maggid showed him tremendous love. One of the stories that happened, there's a lot of beautiful stories. Number one, I still owe you a story. Number one, the Mezritch Maggid, immediately, as soon as he had a chance, he made a chavrusa between the Alter Rebbe and his own son, Rebbe Avram. It's interesting, we all know Rebbe Avram as Rebbe Avram HaMalach, or the Malach, because his Avodas Hashem was with such fire, and he was so removed from worldly things that he was like a Malach. However, I never knew this, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, that there was another name they called him, Rebbe Avram HaKodesh. And he writes that all the Polish tzaddikim called him Rebbe Avram HaKodesh, and the Russian Chassidim and tzaddikim called him Rebbe Avram HaMalach. Why? I don't know, but that's a fact. What? I can't hear you. What? No, he's the son of the Mezritch Maggid. And the Mezritch Maggid made a chavrusa for the Alter Rebbe to learn with the Rebbe Avram HaMalach. Now, the Alter Rebbe was very proficient. He was a Goyen Adir in Nigla de Teire, and Rebbe Avram HaMalach was a Goyen Adir in Nister, in Pnimius HaTeire. So that's what they did. 3 hours, the Rebbe Avram HaMalach would teach the Alter Rebbe Kabbalah and Chassidus, and 3 hours the Alter Rebbe would teach him deep in Yonim in Nigla de Teire. And the Alter Rebbe said to his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, that he was so excited to learn with the Rebbe Avram HaMalach that every time those 3 hours would go by, he would take the clock and turn it back 3 hours or 1 hour, I don't know, it doesn't say how much. And he said those hours that he got in a roundabout way, sort of, be'orma, were his most enjoyable ones. As it says in Mishlei, Shlomo HaMelech says, Mayim gnuvim yum toku. You drink water, it doesn't taste anything, it's water, you're thirsty. But if it's stolen water, it tastes sweet. So he said that this, the Rebbe, Zol Gesund Sein, has a tremendous sikha on this. The sikhas on almost every one of these stories, there's a sikha of the Rebbe explaining it. That once the Rebbe says, the Rebbe says that why? Okay, Mayim Gnuvim Yim Tokabu. The Alter Rebbe was such a great Yer Shemaim, and why is he like proud that he turned the clock back and that was the most enjoyable? And the Rebbe explains that we find in Torah that when something is from a very high level, a high gilui, a tremendous bracha, it comes always be'ormer. It comes in a roundabout, different way, not in the regular straight way. For instance, everyone knows that Yitzchak Avinu wanted to bless Yaakov. We all know what happened. Yaakov had to do it be'ormer. He had to put on the false skin and say, Ani b'chayircha, I'm your firstborn, b'chulu b'chulu. Why? Because it was such a high level of gili, of brachas, that there was no way you can get it in a direct way. You have to go in a ormer. And the Rebbe brings other heichachas. So the Alter Rebbe used to steal these hours and learn with Rebbe Avram. And Rebbe Avram, Pashut, had tremendous affection. He Pashut liked the Alter Rebbe very much. And they both rose, they both grew in the Chassidus and so on and so forth. At one time, the Alter Rebbe says they both decided to go into it says over there that Chayne Ma'agel, he made a ugo. So they decided to go into his Boidadus, the Alter Rebbe and the Maggid's son, to go into a room, to be misboided, to be by themselves, and to delve, to think into inyanim of godliness to the highest levels. And they were both there, and the Alter Rebbe felt that any moment there's going to be kleis hanefesh. They'll pass out for good. And the Alter Rebbe, sort of, the ugo, whatever, they made a place or ugo, whatever it was, they did. I don't think we can understand much of it. The Alter Rebbe jumped out of this trance, of this kleis hanefesh, and there's two versions. He looked at Rabbi Avram, and he saw Rabbi Avram, his neshama is about to go out. So it says that the Alter Rebbe screamed out, Bal korcho chatochai, and that woke him up. Another version is, Frierdiker Rebbe brings another part of the story, that the Alter Rebbe ran and got a hold of a bagel, or a piece of bread. He put butter on it, and he made him wash, he brought water, and he made him make a moitzi and eat. And the Alter Rebbe also ate in front of him. First, Alter Rebbe ate in front of him to bring mamshich, the neshama, back into the gashmis of the world. The Alter Rebbe said about himself at that moment, had he saved Rebbe Avram HaMalach, he said, it's a pasuk in Koheles from Shlomo HaMelech, Af chochmasi amdali, my wisdom saved me. And the Mezritch Maggid was very, very thankful to the Alter Rebbe for saving his son's life. It was a serious case. So there's many stories how the Alter Rebbe's, the Mezritch Maggid showed tremendous love to the Alter Rebbe. He treated him very well.
There's a famous story about the Meimasai Krishma.
Yes. The Mezritch Maggid's son was learning Mishnayos with the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was learning with the Mishnah Me'emasai Koyin Shma Be'arvis, and the Maggid's son got very excited. Right? What's the word?
First Alter Rebbe, I think, read it regular.
Regular, and Mezritch Maggid's son, the Rebbe Avram HaMalach, said, touched the Mishnah differently. He became very, very Beislavus or Beisrakshus, and he said, Me'emasai Koyin Shma means from when do we read the Shema in the evening? But the Mezritch Maggid's son said, Me'emasai Koyin Shema. Shema is read with emo, with fear of Hashem. Emo, not just Me'emasai, emo means fear in Lashon Kodesh. So that's how he touched it. And the Alter Rebbe gave this over. There was a lot of beautiful ways of the Mezritch Maggid how he touched it.
I heard this story that Moses look into a watch, the clock, and go by itself.
That I didn't hear.
My eyes. How you can walk and turn it back.
They're able to do it, but I didn't see that story. But Lapayel could be. There's a story that happened with the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe, I don't know if it was the first time or second. It was the second time he was there, but I'm not sure. The Alter Rebbe didn't have any money, and he lived very, very. What's the word I'm looking for? Very frugally, very poshut, right?
Modest.
Very modest, because he had no money. So he stayed in somebody's house, very cheap, and he ate very little. Then came Pesach. Pesach, the Talmidei HaMaggid that were there for Pesach knew that Pesach is very special by the Mezritch HaMaggid, by the Seder. The whole Seder was so holy, it was on a different level altogether. And the Talmidim that were there used to get from the Mezritch HaMaggid matzah, wine, and all the other things you need for the Seder. However, the Kelim, the Talmidim had to bring themselves. Every Talmid came to the Seder with a kois and a plate, a kaira, whatever it was. The Alter Rebbe had one cup that he owned, and it was a cup from glass, a kois schuchis. This is a story that Tzemach Tzedek tells over. And a kois of glass is a shaila according to some poskim, namely the Ramah, Ramoshe Iserlish, who writes Hagos in the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah holds that you should not kasher a glass cup. Bechlal, people in the olden days, they couldn't afford to have a separate set of kelim for Pesach. So they used to kasher all the kelim according to halacha, whether it was fire or hot water, hagola, but a libun. But the glass cups, so many poskim hold that you are allowed to kasher it for Pesach if you use it a whole year, but the Ramah does not hold so. The Alter Rebbe didn't know what to do. He didn't want to use it, but he instead of, if not to use that cup, he'll have to go buy himself another cup, and for that he would have to go and ask people for money. And he held very strongly from his father Baruch used to do that too in his life. The Gemara says, in other words, if whatever you can do, don't come on to beg chas v'sholom by others for money. If, as much as possible. Sometimes it's not possible. So the Alter Rebbe did not want to go to anyone to ask for money, and so therefore he decided he'll kasher it. And he kashered it, kedasu kedin, and he came to the Seder. And all the Talmidim were sitting there. One of the Talmidim that was there was Mendel Vitebsker, one of the older Talmidim of the Mezritch Maggid that the Alter Rebbe was very, very fond of. In other words, he respected him tremendously. When the Mezritch Maggid was nostalgic, he even considered him his Rebbe after the Mezritch Maggid. But over there, b'shas they were by the Mezritch Maggid, he respected him. We'll talk about that, how he served every one of the Talmidei HaMaggid. The Alter Rebbe was the youngest, and he served all the Talmidei HaMaggid, and from every one of them, he learned whatever nice, special thing they had in Avodah, whether it was Avos Yisrael or Avodas Hashem or whatever it was, he learned from them, from every one of the Talmidim, the Alter Rebbe did. So the Mendel Vitebsker was there by the Seder, and the Mezritch Maggid comes in, and he wants to make Kiddush, and suddenly the Mezritch Maggid, in front of all the Talmidim, says, I smell a reach of a mashu of chametz. The Talmidim became shocked. Nizdazu. Reich of chametz, by the Seder, by the Mezritch Maggid, is only his Talmidim. Chavraya Kadisha. So, nobody said anything. The Mezritch Maggid turns to his Talmid, Mendel Vitebsker, and he says, please go around the table and see where that reach is coming from. Mendel Vitebsker went around the table once, twice, and 3 times. And he said, he came back to the Rebbe, to the Mezritch Maggid, and said, I don't know about it. I don't smell anything. I don't feel a reich. It's not a regular smell, it's a smell, a spiritual smell. So the Mezritch Maggid said these words, he said, what should I do? But the Ramah is standing here upset and not letting me make Kiddush. At that point, Alter Rebbe got shocked and turned, white, and turned to the Mezritch Maggid and said, Rebbe, it's me. I have a kois shel schuchis. And he told him I couldn't afford another cup, and didn't want to go and ask anybody for money. So I kashered it, and I know the Ramah doesn't agree. So the Alter Rebbe felt very, uncomfortable. But the Mezritch Maggid, when he heard it, smiled, walked over to the Alter Rebbe, kissed him on his forehead, and said to him, you have such koyach to cause the Ramah to come here and not let me make Kiddush because of your cup. Can you imagine? And then the Mezritch Maggid said to the Alter Rebbe, for that, you'll make Kiddush in my kois and drink all arba koises in my kois, which never happened to any of the Talmidim in the history of the Mezritch Maggid. So it shows you that the Alter Rebbe, because he did a certain halacha which didn't agree with the Ramah, it caused the Ramah to not. It caused the Ramah to come there and make sure that the Alter Rebbe does agree with him, sort of. That's the koyach of the Alter Rebbe. But that's Tzedek concluded the story, and he said that from then on, my Zayda was always afraid of the Ramah. Meaning, when it came to Apsak Halacha, he was always careful that it should agree with the Ramah also. It's a ma'aseh from this is the koyach of the Alter Rebbe, and also how the Mezritch Maggid looked at it. All right, we should. I'll say one more thing. The Alter Rebbe was mishamish all the Talmidim, the holy Talmidim. Every midah tova that he saw, he would accept it upon himself. Ubifrat, there was a few Talmidim that he specifically made sure to serve them and to help them. One of them was the Rebendel of Haradok, and the other one was Pinchas Horowitz, the Baal Hafloh. one of the Talmidei of Mezritch Maggid. At first, the Talmidei of Maggid they loved the Alter Rebbe. They had tremendous affection for him, but as a grown-up, or as an older person, or as a more learned person has a chavivus to a younger person who's not so great, because they did not know how great the Alter Rebbe was. He was the youngest. He was nechba el hakelim. He hid everything that he knew. But then, after a while, they suddenly realized that zeh kotten gadol yeh. They realized that the Alter Rebbe is greater than all the Chavraya Kadisha. So they respected him and loved him on a different level. The older Talmidim of the Mezritch Maggid used to call the Alter Rebbe Hayoshish Hatzoir, the old youngster. He was old in Chochmah more than anybody else, but in years, on the birth certificate, he was younger. So they called him Hayoshish Hatzoir. And in everything else, he was older than all of them. In Kabbalah, in Chassidus, in Nigla, and so on and so forth. Next time in the Shim, we'll try to discuss when the Alter Rebbe came back to Vitebsk. According to the history, his in-laws, his father-in-law and mother-in-law, I don't know if his father-in-law was still alive, but they already persecuted, meaning they tortured the Alter Rebbe and his wife, even before he went to Mezritch, because he was behaving according to the Shalah and davening long, and they did not like it. They thought he was, as it says in the Gemara, it says that some tzaddikim are so great that when they do certain things, the rest of the tzaddikim, even his friends, think that something is wrong with him. The Gemara says in Posi Lagani, he brings that Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi, by a wedding, would stand in front of the chas and kala, in front of the kala, and take twigs of hadassim, and what is it called, to juggle them. He was a tremendous Talmid Chacham, Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi, a Tana. And his Chaverim said, he's acting foolish. They couldn't figure out why would a guy who knows how to learn so well make it so cheapen himself. But when he was nostalgic, a fire came down from heaven and wouldn't let any of his own Talmidei Chacham Chaverim, Tanoim, to come near him. So what did they say in the Basir Gani? Ahanele shtusa l'sova. Now we know that his acting foolish was something that we couldn't figure out. We had no idea what it was all about. So that's what happened by the Alter Rebbe with his father-in-law. They saw him the way he behaved, and they couldn't handle it. So when he came back from Mezritch, it became even worse. That's when the whole city went out against Alter Rebbe. He had a minion of Talmidim. So next time we'll discuss how he asked the community of Vitebsk to make a debate with him. He'll debate them by himself to all the Gedolei Yisrael over there, and prove to them that the Baal Shem Tov is right, the Mezritch Maggid is right, and so on and so forth. That was one debate. After that, the Alter Rebbe was known to have many vikuchim with the greatest Gedolei Hader. Many hundreds of Chassidim became Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe because of those vikuchim. Because they were under the impression that Chassidim don't know how to learn. But when they saw how the Alter Rebbe knows how to learn, they all dropped everything and followed Alter Rebbe to Liozna later on. And the same thing happened in Vitebsk. So we'll talk about that next time in Mitzvah, which is all very interesting stuff. It was the Mezritch Maggid who sent him for his first, maybe more than the first, but the first vikoach that he had, which was in the city of Shkolov, one of the greatest Misnagnish strongholds. The Mezritch Maggid himself sent him there, before the Mezritch Maggid passed away. It was like Tov Kuf Lamed Beis, a year before the Mezritch Maggid passed away. He sent Alter Rebbe secretly to Shkolov. When Alter Rebbe came, nobody knew who he was. And we'll talk about that in Mitzvah next time. It's very, very interesting. And thank you everyone for coming. And the Eibusha should help that in schus of learning Torah and talking about the Sipuri Tzadikim, Mashiach should be here already and take us out of goals. L'chaim, l'chaim. I thank you. Thank you for Gidon Graziani and the Mishpachtoi for organizing this, and Rabbi Shimel and Rabbi Beigel, and everyone else who's here. Thank you very, very much.